Today's Daf Yomi is Avodah Zarah Daf Beis, Avodah Zarah 2. And before we start the Masechta, we say that this Masechta is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, that's all for the Shvuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. And the first question, even before we begin the Gemara, is why is Avodah Zarah being taught here? Why is it in Nezikin, in the state of dealing with damages? It's idolatry. So Tosfos asks this question, and he says, why is it here in Nezikin? And he says, the Basar the Tani, the top Tosfos on the page. He says, the first Tosfos on the tractate, he says, after we learn Sanhedrin, which deals with Avodas Kochavim, which deals with idolatry, Tana Nami Laha Mesechas Avodah Zarah, because the Mesechas Sanhedrin has to deal with what happens to you if you have an Ir Nidachas, if you have an idolatrous city. So therefore it teaches the law of Avodah Zarah, but Seder Yeshuos. Seder Yeshuos is how Tosfos is referring to Seder Nezikim, because it comes from the book of Isaiah where it says, Amunas Itecha Chosein Yeshuos. So Yeshuos is Nezikim because it teaches us how to separate ourselves from damages. And if that's the case, why isn't it taught directly after Sanhedrin? Meaning to say, Malchus and Shavuos, they are also having to do with Sanhedrin itself. Meaning to say, Sanhedrin gives laws dealing with damages, with lashes, and with oaths. So therefore, it first lists the things that are more directly involved with Sanhedrin, i.e. Shavuos and Malchus, and then it comes back and deals with Avodah Zarah and Harios. So we start the Mishnah. It says, Lifnei Edein Shel Ovdei Kochavim Shlosha Yamim Aser Laseis V'Laseis Imayim. 3 days before the idolater, before their Edein. Edein is their day of worship. 3 days before, and we'll see exactly what this means in the Gemara. 3 days before their Edein, before their day of their festivals, of the idolatries, you're not allowed to do business with them. Rashi says because he's going to then go, the idol worshiper will then go and give praise to his idolatry on the day of his festival for having such a good business deal. Shilon, you're not allowed to lend them anything, man, or to borrow anything. Avos, to lend them money, or Wilvos, man, or to borrow money from them. With Poran, man, to pay them or to be paid from them. Rabbi Yehuda says, Nifrain Mehen, you're allowed to collect money from them if Nesha Mates or Hulo, because he's going to be upset. They have to pay you. Amrlo, they said back to Rabbi Yehuda, Afal Pisha Mates or Huachshav, even though he's distressed now, Sameach Huacharzman, he's going to be happy afterwards. So therefore, even you can't even collect money from them. Tosfos asked the question, well, if that's the case, how are we able to do business with those around us today who are idolaters? Let's assume, for the sake of this question, that he assumed that the Christians around him are considered to have the law of idolatry. So Tosfos, and clearly, if their Sunday is a holiday, so you can't do business 3 days before, 3 days after. Good morning, Hobbs. Good morning. You have the Gemara here. Okay, there's a Gemara of Avodah Zarah. So how are you able to do business with them 3 days before, 3 days afterwards? So Tosfos gives several answers to this question. He says, well, one idea is, and he rejects this answer, is because the idolaters outside the land of Israel, they're not really idolatry, but it's just minhag avoseim b'yadeim. It's just the custom of their forefathers. They're not really idolaters. They're not worshiping paganism. They're just going through the motions. Another explanation is, Tosfos says it's allowed because of Ava, because if we're not going to allow this, then it's going to cause a lot of hatred in the world, and it could put everybody at risk, and Jewish people live in the world. So therefore, we know that under certain circumstances, we're allowed to be flexible because we don't want to cause hatred in the world. Another explanation is that he says, we know that the Akum Shebenenu Kimon Begavayah Pochel is coming. We know that the idolaters amongst us, they don't really worship idolatry. And so therefore it's another reason why he allows it. Another possible reason is the explanation from Rabbeinu Tam. He says this prohibition is only if you're concerned that they're going to make a sacrifice. It says dafka b'midi tikrovo, something that they're going to worship, offer on the altar, but not just regular purchasing and selling. Anyway, most of these laws in this first part of the tractate are not applicable today. The commentaries say these are not the people we're living amongst today, but this is for that time period. So Rav Shmuel. So now we go back to the text of our Gemara about Yemei Edehen. So we started by saying that 3 days before their Eidein, which is their festival, you're not allowed to do business with the idolaters. So Rav Ushmuel, Chad Tani Eidein, V'chad Tani Eidein. One said it with an aleph and one said it with an ayin. Ayin is, Ashkenazi Jews in America mostly just pronounce this word the same, the aleph and the ayin. But in those days, it was slightly different, more common. Even today, you can hear people pronounce it differently. And so Rav Shmuel one had the version that the word of their festivals was with an aleph, and one had the version of the Gemara of the Mishnah that the word of their festivals was with an ayin. And mandatani edayin lo mishtavish, mandatani edayin lo mishtavish. Either way could actually be correct, says the Gemara. Mandatani edayin lo mishtavish. This is going to be the only Gemara in Shas which actually opens with Agadata. We'll see in a moment. Chakiga is a little bit of Agadata right at the very beginning, but still, this is the only one that opens with Agadata. So Mantani Edein lo Mishtavish, because it says Ki Karov Yom Edam, because it says in Deuteronomy the day of their Edam is coming close, meaning to say the day of their idolatry, as Rashi points out. And others say Mantani Edein lo Mishtavish Tilsev Yitnu Edeim V'Yitzdaku, and that's the verse from Isaiah, and that's also a reference to idolatry. That's the Gemara's assumption now. Gemara's going to question that ultimately, that maybe it's not referring to idolatry, but that's the Gemara's assumption. Gemara first says, "Amanda Tani Day, and my time will Tani Day." And the one who has it with an aleph, why doesn't he have it with an ayin? Amracha Tabra, because he says that the word Edeim is an expression of breaking, and so therefore it's more logical to assume and it's with the aleph, because that's what we're talking about. We want to say it in a pejorative manner. It's not a very ecumenical text, this tractate of Avodah Zarah. Uman de Tani Edeya, and my time will Tani Edeya. And the one who learns it with an aleph, why does he not say it with an ayin? Amracha Tavra Adif. Uman Tani Edeya, and my time will Tani Edeya. And the one who says with an ayin, why does he not say it with an aleph? Amracha Man Kangar Muhu Tavra, because he says, what causes their holiday to break? Boker Tov, Jeff. He says, what causes their holiday to break? The testimony that they're going to have to testify about themselves. Hilkach Edus Adifa. So the Edus is, the word Edeim is going to be better than with an aleph, meaning to say on the day of their judgment, they are going to have to testify that they worshipped idolatry in this world. So the Gemara says, this idea that it's Edeim with an ayin refers to idolatry, it's based upon this verse from Isaiah. They will give their testimony and they will be found righteous. Does that refer to idolatry? It refers to the Jewish people. What are you talking about? How can this refer to idolatry? It refers to the Jewish people, because as we stated, Nama Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught, Kol mitzvah sheYisrael osem olam hazeh, bo'os u'me'idos la'em olam haba. Any mitzvah that the Jewish people do in this world will come and testify about them in the world to come. Okay, imagine all the mitzvahs we've done, they're going to gather up and line up. So for some people, it'll be a very long trial. For other people, it'll be a very quick trial. But all our mitzvahs that we've done, we got up early, came to study the daf, the davening, lined up every day. Every day it's there lining up for us. So give tzedakah, it lines up. So it says, so how does this refer to idolatry? The second part of the verse says they will hear and they will say the truth. That's the idolaters. So El Amar Rav Huna B'rei Rav Yeshua Manda Amar Edeim, the one who has the text with an ayin Edeim Mechacha. He doesn't learn that from that verse. He learns that from a different verse, from the verse from Isaiah chapter 44, the next chapter. Yotre Pasel, Kulam Tohu, Vachamudeim Balyo Ilu, Ve'edeim Hema. That those who make the idols, Yotre Pasel, Kulam Tohu, they're all nothing. Like Tovavo, Chamudeim Bal Yoilu, they're the precious things, the things that they love will not help, because Ve'edeim Hema, and this will be their testify. Their idols will testify about them in the future that they worship them. And so from this verse we will learn that idolatry is called Eidos because it testifies about those who worship in the future. And so now the Gemara goes into Agadata. So Darash Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa. V'itema Rabbi Simlai. Remember, we had Rabbi Simlai doing the Agadata at the end of Makos. He says about Tariag mitzvos. Remember that, Rabbi Simlai? So he says, Darash Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa V'itema Rabbi Simlai. Asid Lavo maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sefer Torah. You'll see, this is one of my favorite Agadatas in the whole shot. In the future, God is going to bring a Sefer Torah. He's going to put it in his lap. He's going to take a Sefer Torah and he's going to put it in his lap. He says, whoever was engaged in this is going to come and should get its reward. He holds a Sefer Torah in its lap, like you hold a beloved child in your lap, and you say, for the one who was engaged in this, let him come and get its reward. Whoever can prove that they were engaged in this Torah scroll. So immediately all the idolaters will come and line up, but they'll be Bilruvia. They will all be mixed together. And each nation will not come on its own. As it says, all the nations will come together. God says, God says, don't come to me all mixed up. Everyone should come on their own. Every nation by itself is sofra. And all of their sofra doesn't mean they're scribes, because it means they're scholars here. As it says, it says they will gather up by their nations. And L'um means a kingdom, as it says, God says, I want to do each nation by themselves. So first of all, why not? Why can't God judge them together? Mika or Vuvia coming at Kadosh Baruch Hu. Does God get confused when they're all mixed up? No, it's God could tell the difference between them, but he wanted them to each give their own answers to the questions he was going to pose to them. The first nation that came up was Rome. My time, Rome came up first because it was the most distinguished. We know in the Chashiva, and how do we know that Rome was the most distinguished? It says in the verse in Daniel, when Daniel is talking about the dreams that were given to Nebuchadnezzar, that Daniel interpreted them about the four animals. It says V'techul kol ara utudishena v'tadkine. Meaning to say, the angel, he said, this is what the angel who explained the dream said to me, that the fourth animal will hint to the fourth kingdom that will continue to reign on the earth. And that will be different from all the other kingdoms. It will destroy the earth. Rabbi Yochanan Zu, Romi Chayeves. This is wicked Rome. Shetiva Yatza B'Kol, that its nature, its authority went out on the whole world. And how do we know that the one who is most important goes first, or the one who did the most damage goes first? Get the Rav Chisda, the Amar Rav Chisda, Melech v'tzibor Melech nechnas techila. And if you have a king and a tzibor and a public, both standing judgment, the king gets judged first. Shenemar lasos mishpat, as it states in the pasuk, lasos mishpat avdu mishpat amo Yisrael, as it says in Malachim, to do justice to carry out justice on his people Israel, meaning to say that the mishpat of the king is first, because first he says, so mishpat of do mishpat, to do the justice on his servant, and then on Amo, so mishpat avdo, umishpat amo Yisrael. I don't know why I read that the wrong way the first time. Do the justice of his servant, and then the judgment of his people. So we see that the judgment of his servant, the king, comes before the judgment of his people. So why is it the case that the servant is the king is judged before the people? It's disrespectful to make the king sit outside waiting for the previous court proceeding. If you've ever been in a court proceeding, it's just so excruciatingly slow as the other people go before you. Or alternatively, because he wants to the king should get his judgment before God gets before the judge gets angry, and it's always better to get the judge when he's in a good mood. I was listening to a podcast on the DAF. I was listening to Rabbi Aryeh Leibowitz's, and he said that they did a study that the judges who give out their sentences just before lunch give out harsher sentences when the judgment is given then, because they're in a bad mood then, because they're hungry. I don't know. So this is a real world advice. Get your sentencing early in the day. I don't know what to tell you, right? Or maybe right after lunch when they're full and they're in a good mood. So God says to the kingdom of Rome, what were you doing all this time? What were you doing? We made a lot of marketplaces. Made a lot of bathhouses. We brought a lot of gold and silver. We did them just for the Jewish people. So they should study Torah. First of all, this reminds me of the Gemara in Shabbos 33b, where we have Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was sitting, and they were talking. Somebody was talking about the markets. I think it was Rabbi Yehuda Bar Hilai was talking about the markets the Romans were doing, and he was praising them. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "No, they did it all for themselves." And then he had to go into hiding. So it's a similar theme here. So he says we did it all for the Jewish people. God responds to them, Shotim Shabaolam, you're fools. You did it all for yourself. You did it all for yourself. You didn't do it. We know you didn't do it. We know you didn't do it. We know you didn't do it for the Jewish people. We did it for yourselves. You created markets for your harlots. That's why you created the markets. You created bathhouses so you could, get your massages. And gold and silver is mine. We just pause for a second. What were they trying to trick God? And also, why does God call them fools? He should say you're liars. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says, no, the mistake was they weren't lying, but in retrospect, they had that kavana, but they didn't have that kavana at the outset. They didn't have the proper intent. And so therefore they were called fools, because all they had to do was change their intent and it would have been okay. So he says, is there anybody amongst you that's magid zos, that can say this? Shenemar, because it says, mi v'chem yagid zos. Who amongst you will say this? Mi v'chem yagid zos. Who amongst you will say this? As it says in Isaiah, "Ein zos el Torah," and we know that zos is a reference to Torah. It says, "V'zos Torah, asher sam Moshe." This is the Torah. Is there anybody who could say that they point to their life and say they studied Torah? Can the Romans say that? Romans left downtrodden. Yatzas Malchus Romi, the kingdom of Rome entered in. Yatzas Malchus Romi, the kingdom of Rome exited. V'nichnasai Malchus Pras, and the kingdom of Persia entered. I guarantee you, I'm sure that since today Israel is in a war with Persia, with Iran, well, that some people are going to cite this Gemara as being like symbolic, because look what the Gemara says. So immediately Persia enters after it. My time, why is Persia coming after Rome? The Chashiva Basra. They're the next most important. When we know in the Kasa, and how do we know it's written that Persia is the second one after Rome? Because it states, with respect to the dream that Daniel had about the kings that are going to rule over the world, he says, "Va'aru cheva acharei tinyana dam yodov." And the next animal that came in after the first one was similar to a bear. Vitani Rav Yosef Elu Parsiim. This refers to the Persians. Sha'ochim v'shosim kadov. Persians eat and drink like a bear. Mesurbal and basar, they're fat. Kadov, like a bear. Megalon seir, kadov, and they grow their hair like a bear. Ve'en lahem menucha, kadov, and they don't have any rest like a bear. I want Kadosh Baruch Hu, and God says, "B'mayasak," meaning to say, which good deeds did you do that as a result of them you get reward? Meaning to say to the Persians, why do you think you're worthy to get reward? Amar Mufan Ribona Shalom. Harbe Gesharim Gasharno. God, we made a lot of bridges. Harbe Karachim. Harbe Karachim Kavashnu. We conquered a lot of cities. Harbe Mochamos Asinu. We did a lot of wars. We only did these wars for the Jewish people so that they should engage in Torah study. God says, I don't buy your press release. God says, no way. He says, you did it all for yourself. You made bridges so you could charge taxes. You made cities just so you can get a draft. Wars. I did the wars. Don't you? You're not the ones doing the wars. I'm arranging all the wars. It says Hashem ish milchama. God is a man of war. Is there anyone amongst you who could say Zos? As it says, Mi b'chem yagid Zos, v'ein Zos el Torah. Zos refers to Torah, as it says, Shenemar v'Zos Torah asher sam Moshe. Miya yatzu milfanav v'pachin nefesh. So the Persians left downtrodden. Well, since the Persians saw that the Romans, that their line of questioning their line of response didn't work, my time why they even bother going in? If they saw they couldn't say Torah. So the Gemara says, Amro inu satri beis hamikdash v'anan baninan. They said they destroyed the beis hamikdash and we built it. So if that's the question, if they were so proud that they built the Beis Hamikdash, why didn't they say that at the beginning? You were wondering that, Jeff? So why didn't they say that at the beginning? So Tosfos asks your question, Jeff. Tosfos says, the answer is only that generation could say that they built the Beis Hamikdash. But we wanted to know about eternally, what were many generations doing? And so that was only the defense for that one generation. The Persian concept wanted more. So therefore, means saying the Persians today can't take credit for building the Beis Hamikdash. So that's the idea. So the Gemara is so too for every nation. So since we know, so hold on. And so it was with every single nation. So the Gemara says, since all the nations saw that the first generations, and nothing else because they didn't engage in Torah study, my time at Island, why'd they bother going up? So the Gemara explains, all the other nations said, listen, Babylon and Persia enslaved, Rome and Persia enslaved the Jews, but we didn't enslave the Jews, so maybe we'll get off. So the Gemara says, what's the reason why these earlier ones, Rome and Persia, are considered important, and Babylon and Greece, which are the other two, presumably, are not considered to be as prestigious? Gemara says, Mishum Nahanach, Because the Rome and Persia, their kingdoms will last until the Mashiach comes. Meaning to say that when Persia falls, that's when the Mashiach will come. That's the part that I thought that some people are going to say, aha, that's why Persia's coming down. It's the Messianic era. Pretty sure somebody's going to say that on Instagram today. You let me know because I don't go on it. So the nation of the world said to God, why are you punishing us? Did you give anything to us that we didn't accept? Meaning to say, it's not our fault. You didn't give us the Torah. Gemara says, one second. Can they really say this? Can they really say you gave it to us and we didn't accept? And the Ksiv, and it says about that pasuk, Eloka miteiman yavo, v'kadosh mehar paran. So God came to the Har Sinai from Seir. He came from first offering it to Esav, and also he came from Teman. And so God first came from the Mount of Paran. My Bible Seir, my Bible Paran. What was he doing in Seir and Paran? That God first went to Seir, offered them the Torah. He went to every nation, offered them the Torah, and they didn't accept it. Until he came to the Jews and accepted it. So what does it mean that? How could the nation say you never offered to us? This is what it means. Did we actually receive the Torah and not uphold it? It's not our fault. Gemara says, and this explanation itself should be the line of the prosecution. Why didn't you accept it? So this is what the nation said. The Jewish people, as we learn Shabbos, Beiches says, how did they accept it? They accepted it only because you held the mountain over their heads like a barrel. And you held it over their heads like a barrel. And so therefore, is it our fault? But you didn't offer this to us, so it's not our fault. So okay, that we'll stop here and pick this up, God willing. This is the Daf Yomi for Shabbos, so we'll do it at noon today, and we'll also do it, God willing, on Shabbos Kodesh. And we're going to say to Rabbi Yosef, we say,